I was kicked out of my wife's wake on my son's orders. That night, still in my suit and with the smell of lilies clinging to my hands, I made one phone call that turned my grief into something much colder. If you were me, what would you have done? Before you answer, hear me out to the end. Then you can tell me whether I went too far, not far enough, or just finally stood up for myself. My name is Thomas Harris, but everyone calls me Tom. I am 71 years old, a retired electrician from Columbus, Ohio. Until 3 weeks ago, I was a husband of 48 years. Now I'm a widower with one son, one granddaughter, and a house that suddenly feels 4 sizes too big. I thought burying my wife Ellen would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to endure. I was wrong. The hardest thing was realizing in the middle of her wake that my own son no longer saw me as family, only as an obstacle. The funeral home smelled like coffee and cheap floral spray, the kind that clogs your throat and makes your eyes water even if you're not crying. Ellen lay in the open casket at the front of the room, framed by wreaths and framed photos the director had arranged like a catalog layout. Her hands were folded around the rosary her sister insisted on. Her hair was styled the way she wore it in her teaching days, soft curls around her face. It looked like her and nothing like her at the same time. I stood near the casket greeting people the way the director told me to do, shaking hands, receiving hugs, nodding through the same comments over and over. She looked so peaceful, Tom. She was such a light. You two were the perfect couple. I smiled, said thank you, and tried not to look at the empty chair at the kitchen table of my mind, the cold side of the bed that waited for me at home. My son, Mark, floated around the room in a suit that probably cost more than my first truck. His wife Jenna stayed glued to his side, in a black dress that somehow still managed to look like a social media photo shoot. Every time I caught her eye, she looked away like my grief embarrassed her. When our granddaughter Madison, Maddie, arrived, she came straight to me. 14, all knees and elbows and eyeliner she didn't really need. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered, hugging me so hard my ribs creaked. "Your grandma loved you more than anything," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Remember that." For a while, I thought maybe the day would pass as peacefully as such a day could. The pastor said his words. People drifted from the viewing room to the little reception area with the coffee urn and store-bought cookies. I moved from group to group, shaking hands, telling old stories about Ellen's garden, her students, her lasagna. Then I overheard Jenna. She stood near the coffee table with 2 of her friends talking in a low tone that carried anyway. "He's doing it again," she hissed. "Just hovering over the casket. It's depressing everyone." One of the women nodded. "My God, if my dad acted like that in public, I'd lose it. People came to pay their respects, not watch a breakdown." "He's making Mark look bad," Jenna said. "Like he's not supporting his father or something. We talked about this. Mark needs to be the strong one today." I felt my ears heat. My hands, clasped in front of me, started to shake. Ellen has been in the ground less than a day, I thought. And I'm a problem because I'm standing near her casket? I stepped away before I could say something I'd regret. My heart monitor, the one Ellen always nagged me to wear, beeped softly in my shirt pocket. I pressed it off. I had just turned toward the hallway for a breath of air when Mark intercepted me. "Dad, can we talk for a second?" His tone was tight, the way it used to get when he'd been caught lying about homework. "Sure," I said, following him toward a quiet corner near the coat rack. He didn't meet my eyes. "Look, Jenna and I have been talking, so have some of the guests." My stomach clenched. "About what?" "You're making people uncomfortable." I blinked. "By standing next to my wife's casket at my wife's wake." Mark winced like I'd slapped him. "Dad, please don't make this harder. You've been snapping at the funeral director, refusing to let anybody help, hovering over Mom like—" He trailed off, searching for a softer word and not finding one. "Maybe it would be better if you went home for a while, get some rest." I thought I'd misheard. You want me to leave? Just for tonight, he said quickly. We'll handle the rest of the wake and the after thing at Jenna's parents'. You can come to the burial tomorrow. Jenna appeared beside him like she'd been summoned. Mr. Harris, we all know you're devastated, she said, voice sugar-coated and sharp at the same time. But people are talking. You're making a scene. Mark is barely holding it together. Please don't put more on him. I'm making a scene? My voice cracked. By mourning my wife? A couple at the coffee table glanced over, then looked away fast. The director shifted awkwardly near the door. I realized it would take only one raised voice or one accusation for this room to turn fully against me. Widowed old man losing it. Poor Mark and Jenna having to manage him. Mark touched my elbow. Dad, I'm asking you to go home. I need you to trust me to take care of things tonight. I stared at him. My son. The kid I'd carried on my shoulders through summer parades. The young man whose first apartment deposit I'd paid. The husband whose down payment on this very house I'd scraped my savings to help with. The man Ellen always defended. He works hard, Tom. Cut him some slack. When I thought he got too entitled. Is that an order? I asked quietly. Mark swallowed. If that's what it takes for you to listen, yes. Please don't make me call somebody to escort you out, Dad. Just go home. For a second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Then Jenna squeezed his arm, hard, and it was gone. I looked past them, toward Ellen's casket. The flowers blurred. My chest burned like someone had turned on a furnace inside my ribs. All right, I said. My voice sounded strange, even to me. If that's what you want from your father on the night your mother's being waked, I'll go. Jenna exhaled in obvious relief. Mark unclenched slightly. Thank you, he said. It's for the best. I walked out alone. No one stopped me. No one followed me. My wife lay 10 yards away in a rented box while her husband left on his son's orders like an unwanted guest. The December air slapped my face as I stepped outside. I buttoned my coat with shaking fingers and crossed the icy parking lot to my truck. The sky was that flat gray that makes it hard to tell if it's late afternoon or night. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and Ellen's rosary beads in my coat pocket. I'd slipped them out of her hands earlier. The director's frown be damned. She'd want me to have them. Can you believe this? I whispered to no one. They kicked me out of your wake, Elle. Our boy. The silence that answered was the heaviest I'd ever heard. On the drive home, I passed Mark and Jenna's subdivision. The big brick house on the corner, 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, wraparound porch, rose like a monument to other people's expectations. My name sat on that deed right under Mark's. The bank had insisted on it when I co-signed. I'd paid the first 2 years of their mortgage when Mark's job hit a rough patch. I'd eaten canned soup so they could have stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. Ellen had told me it was worth it to help them get started. They're our family, she'd said, patting my hand at the kitchen table. We do what we can. I pulled into my own driveway, a plain 1-story ranch with peeling trim and a cracked walkway. Ellen's rose bushes were already dead for the season. The porch light I'd meant to replace still flickered. Inside, the house greeted me with emptiness. Her mug was still in the sink, lipstick faint on the rim. Her cardigan still rested on the back of her chair. The faint scent of her lavender lotion lingered in the hallway. I set my keys on the hook and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. Grief hit me full force then. Not the controlled version I'd allowed at the funeral home, but the kind that makes you gasp and clutch your chest. I pressed my palms to my eyes and let it happen. They kicked me out of my wife's wake, my own son. When the storm passed, a different feeling remained, harder, colder. It spread through my veins like ice water. I got up, wiped my face, and went to Ellen's desk in the spare bedroom. We'd kept all our important papers in the bottom drawer, mortgage documents, bank statements, Mark's loan agreements. We were old-fashioned. No scanning, no cloud storage, just files in labeled folders. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Mark, House Business. The edges were worn soft from my fingers. Inside were copies of the loan I'd taken against my own house to help him start his construction company, the equity line I'd opened to bridge them through when Jenna had insisted on quitting her job to be a full-time lifestyle blogger, the documents from when the bank had required me to be co-owner on his house since his credit wasn't strong enough. Ellen had signed some of them as a witness. Her neat teacher's handwriting stared up at me from the pages. "You really think he'll pay us back?" she'd asked me once, half joking. "Of course," I'd replied. "He's our son." Now I wasn't so sure. On top of the stack sat a business card. Alan K. Morris, ESQ, Estate and Business Planning. Alan and I had gone to high school together. He'd handled our wills, our power of attorney, the paperwork when Ellen and I set up a small education fund for Maddie. He'd also warned me, more than once, to stop tying myself financially to Mark's life. "You're one health scare away from needing that money yourself," he'd said just last year. I stared at his number. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Morris?" "It's Tom," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Tom Harris." "Tom?" His tone softened immediately. "I'm so sorry about Ellen. I saw the obituary but didn't want to intrude. How are you holding up?" "They kicked me out of her wake," I said. "That's how I'm holding up." Silence. Then carefully, "Who did?" "Mark, on Jenna's suggestion. I was making people uncomfortable." Alan exhaled slowly. "Tom, I need to ask you some questions," I said. "About those documents we signed for Mark. The house, the business loans, the line of credit." "Of course," he said. "Do you have them in front of you?" I did. We went through them one by one. My stomach knotted tighter with each page. "On the house," Alan said, "you're listed as co-owner and guarantor. If you withdraw your guarantee, the bank has the right to call the loan if they determine Mark can't qualify a loan." "And can he?" I asked. "I doubt it," Alan said. "Not with the debt he's carrying. That last refinance pushed his ratios to the edge even with your support." "What about the business line?" I flipped to that section. "You're sole guarantor," Alan reminded me. "If you rescind, the bank again can demand immediate payment or collateral. In English, they can shut him down." "In English, yes." I stared at Ellen's handwriting on the witness lines. "For our son, for our granddaughter, for family." "Tom," Alan said gently, "what are you thinking of doing?" "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that my son stood 10 feet from his mother's casket and told me to leave because I was making his life harder. I'm thinking I spent 40 years providing for him, and 3 years providing for him and his wife, and his perfect house. I'm thinking Ellen is not here to talk me out of anything anymore." "I understand," Alan said, and I believed he did. "Can I legally withdraw my guarantees?" I asked. "Can I legally alter my will without Mark getting a say?" "Yes," he said. "You're of sound mind. You're not obligated to finance your adult son's lifestyle. And as for your estate, you can do anything you want with your assets as long as it's documented properly." "What if I want to make sure Maddie is provided for without a penny ending up in her parents' hands?" Alan paused, then said, "Then we talk about a trust." My grief shifted then into something else. Purpose. "Meet me tomorrow afternoon," I said. "After the burial. I'll bring all the papers." "Tom, one more thing," I cut in. "Is there any way to adjust what we agreed to pay for Ellen's services? The wake, the reception. You're the contract holder, yes?" "I am." "Then you control the payments." "Good," I said, "because I'm done paying for rooms I'm not allowed to stand in." We agreed on a time. I hung up and stared at the silent phone. That was when it rang again. "Maddie," said the screen. I answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart," she sniffed. "Grandpa? Are you home? They made you leave? I tried to argue with Mom, but she told me to stay out of it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She was crying. That alone almost broke me more than the wake had. "It's not your fault," I said softly. "None of this is." "It is," she insisted. "If I'd told you sooner, maybe—" "Told me what?" There was a pause on the line filled with her shaky breathing. "Grandpa, there's something you need to know about Mom and Dad. About what they've been talking about since Grandma got sick. About you." Her words came in a rush then, tripping over sobs, and each one cut deeper than the last. That was the moment my grief turned into a plan. How far would you go if you found out your own child was counting down the days until they could lock you away and sell everything you'd worked for? The next morning, I stood at the cemetery as they lowered Ellen's casket into the frozen ground. Mark and Jenna arrived late, eyes red but not from tears. Mark took his place opposite me, refusing to meet my gaze. Jenna clung to his arm like the cameras were still on us. Maddie stood between us, fingers tangled with mine so tightly my knuckles hurt. Every so often she'd glance up at me with an expression that said she remembered our call and couldn't unhear any of it. The pastor droned on about ashes and dust and eternal life. Ellen would have hated the cold. I tucked my scarf tighter around my neck and imagined her complaining about her toes freezing. When it was over, people lined up again to offer their condolences. This time, I didn't linger. I accepted handshakes, nodded through platitudes, and when Mark approached me, I held up a hand. "We're done here," I said. He frowned. "Dad, we need to talk." "Yes," I said. "We do, but not now. I have an appointment." Jenna's eyes narrowed. "With who?" "Someone who actually sees me as more than an inconvenience," I said. "You have a good day now." I walked away before she could spit back whatever was on her tongue. At 3 o'clock I sat in Alan's office surrounded by mahogany and law books. Ellen had always teased that his place looked like a set from an old courtroom drama. I handed over the stack of documents. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything: my house, my savings, the accounts Ellen and I had set up, the loans tied to Mark. And then we talked about what Maddie had told me. The night before, after the wake, she'd heard her parents in the kitchen. The walls in their house were thin. "Dad says once Grandpa is alone it'll be easier," Maddie had whispered into the phone. He said, "He's not going to manage that big old house by himself. Give it 6 months, a year tops. We'll get power of attorney, move him into a facility, and sell the place while the market's still up." She imitated Mark's voice perfectly. "Between the house and whatever Mom left him, we'll be set. No more second-guessing jobs. No more begging your grandpa for help. It'll all be ours outright." Mom just laughed. Maddie continued miserably. She said, "Just make sure he doesn't blow it on some dumb donation or trust for Maddie first." A trust for Maddie. The exact thing I'd just asked Alan about. Now, in his office, I repeated those words. Alan's eyes hardened behind his glasses. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," he said, "but I've seen this play out more times than I'd like to admit." We drafted changes. I revoked my guarantee on Mark's business line of credit and instructed Alan to notify the bank. We prepared a notice for the mortgage lender that I was withdrawing as co-signer, forcing them to reevaluate Mark's loan. "Once they run his numbers without you," Alan said, tapping his pen, "they'll either demand he refinance with another guarantor or pay down a significant portion. If he can't, they can start foreclosure proceedings. It won't be immediate, but it will be real." "Good," I said. We also rewrote my will. Mark and Jenna's names disappeared from the primary bequests. Instead, we created a trust in Maddie's name, with Alan's firm as trustee, structured so that any funds used for her benefit bypassed her parents. College, first car, a down payment someday, yes. A new SUV for Jenna, a bigger kitchen for Mark, no. We also added a clause. If anyone contested the will, they forfeited any rights to any part of the estate. Harsh, Alan commented, but effective. Let them be mad, I said. I'm done paying to be mistreated. As for Ellen's accounts, Alan confirmed what I already suspected. Everything had gone to me as surviving spouse. Mark and Jenna had assumed they'd get a windfall, but Ellen had never changed the beneficiary designations. Maybe she'd meant to. Maybe she hadn't. Either way, now that she was gone, I was the one holding the strings. Tom, Alan said once we'd signed the initial documents, I have to ask, are you sure? Once we trigger these changes, the fallout with Mark will be significant. They already cut me out, I said quietly. They just didn't expect the man they cut out to have any teeth. The next week was a blur of phone calls and quiet moves. I called the funeral home and requested an itemized bill. The director hemmed and hawed about package pricing. I was asked to leave my wife's wake, I said calmly. I'm not paying for coffee and cookies for people who stayed after her husband was escorted out. Remove those items, adjust the bill accordingly, or we can discuss it in small claims court. He adjusted. I canceled the catering deposit for the post-funeral gathering at Jenna's parents' house. The contract was in my name. The refund hit my account 3 days later. I called the auto insurance company and removed my credit card from Mark's SUV policy. I notified the bank that any automatic transfers from my accounts to Mark's were to be stopped immediately. Slowly, methodically, I untangled my life from my sons. For a few days, there was silence from their end. I suspect they were busy basking in the sympathy from neighbors and Jenna's followers about the difficult day and family drama. Then, on a Thursday night, my phone lit up with Mark's name. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad," he said, annoyed rather than grieving. "What's going on with the mortgage?" "Good evening to you too, Mark." "Cut it out," he snapped. "The bank called us today. Said something about needing updated financials because a co-signer was withdrawing. Are you trying to ruin us?" "I'm trying to stop financing my own destruction," I said evenly. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, "that I know about your little plan. The one where you and Jenna get power of attorney, tuck me into a facility, and sell my house and everything your mother and I worked for while I'm still breathing." There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. "She told you," he hissed. "Maddie told you." "Your daughter told me the truth you weren't man enough to say to my face," I replied. "You kicked me out of my wife's wake. You called me a burden behind my back. And you thought I'd just keep paying your bills until you could take the rest." "It's not like that," Mark protested. "We were worried about you. You left the stove on last year." "I was distracted because your mother was in chemo," I said. "You know that. Don't twist it into senility because it suits your plans." Silence. Then, "So what? You'll just pull everything and leave us homeless? Jenna quit her job because you said you'd always help. We have obligations. We have Maddie to think about." "I am thinking about Maddie," I said. "Every move I'm making is for her. You and Jenna made it clear what you think of me. You'll have to think about yourselves from now on." His voice rose in anger. "You can't do this. Mom would never have wanted this. She wanted us to be taken care of." "She wanted you to be decent human beings," I said. "You had every chance. You chose otherwise." "What do you want from us?" he demanded. "An apology? Fine. I'm sorry I asked you to leave the wake. It was a stressful day. Happy now?" The lack of sincerity in his tone was almost laughable. "I want nothing from you," I said. "That's the point. But you might want something from me, and that window is closing." "You're being ridiculous," he said. "We'll talk about this when you calm down." "I'm perfectly calm," I said. "You should know your guarantees are gone. My will is changed, and any future decisions about my estate will not include you. From now on, if you have questions, you can ask Alan." "You went to Morris?" he exploded. "Dad, you can't just cut your own son out of everything. That's legal," I said. And done. I ended the call while he was still sputtering. Within a week, Jenna started texting. "You're punishing us for one bad moment. We were grieving too. Maddie misses you. Don't you care about her?" That last one made my hand tighten around the phone. I responded to that one. "I care more than you can imagine. That's why I'm doing this." She didn't reply. The bank moved faster than even Alan predicted. Without my steady pension and paid-off house in the equation, Mark's numbers looked ugly. They gave him 90 days to either refinance with a new guarantor or bring a large lump sum to the table. He had neither. Alan kept me updated in measured tones. I listened, nodded, and went back to my quiet routines. Coffee at the kitchen table, walking around the block, repainting the front bedroom Ellen always wanted to turn into a sewing room. Grief still lived in the house with me, but it had changed shape. It was no longer helpless. It had sharp edges now. Maddie came over one Saturday afternoon with a backpack and puffy eyes. "Mom dropped me at the mall," she said, standing in my doorway, "but I told my friends I couldn't go. Can I stay here for a while?" "Anytime," I said, stepping aside so she could enter the house that might have been sold out from under me if she hadn't spoken up. She wandered through the rooms, touching framed photos, Ellen's knickknacks. In the living room, she stopped at the picture of Mark as a toddler on my shoulders, Ellen laughing beside us. "Mom says you're being cruel," she said quietly, "that you're trying to ruin our lives." "I'm trying to stop them from ruining mine," I said. "I know." She turned to me, eyes shining. "I heard more, Grandpa. Mom said, fine. If he wants to act like a stranger, we'll treat him like one. Let the state take care of him when he falls. We'll still get something eventually." She swallowed hard. "I don't want any of this. I just want my family back." I put an arm around her shoulders. "Families don't get to treat each other any way they like and still expect access to everything," I said. "Sometimes the only way to teach that is to let people feel the consequences." "Is there any way this ends without everything blowing up?" she whispered. "There is a way this ends with you okay," I said. "That's what I care about now." The blow-up came 2 months later in Alan's office. By then, the bank had officially started the process on the house. Mark had managed to scrape together a smaller down payment than he needed by maxing out new credit cards and taking advances on Jenna's parents, but it wasn't enough. He'd called me twice more, each time angrier, each time less interested in compromise and more in demanding. When Alan's secretary called to schedule a family meeting, I agreed on one condition. Maddie would be allowed to attend. "They're going to scream," she warned me when I picked her up that day. "Probably," I said. "You can leave the room if it gets to be too much." Alan's conference room had a long table and 2 bright lights. Ellen would have hated it. She preferred conversations at the kitchen table. Mark and Jenna sat on one side, dressed in their best, respectable couple outfits. Jenna's lips were pinched white. Mark's jaw worked like he was chewing on rocks. Maddie sat beside me on the other side, squeezing my hand under the table so tightly my knuckles cracked. Alan opened a folder. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, Tom asked me to update his estate planning and financial arrangements following Ellen's passing. Given the amount of overlap with Mark's obligations, it seemed wise to have everyone in the same room to understand the situation." "Great," Mark said, sarcasm dripping. "Let's hear about how my father decided to make us homeless because we hurt his feelings." I looked at him evenly. "You hurt more than my feelings. But this isn't about revenge, Mark. It's about responsibility." "Could have fooled me," Jenna muttered. Alan cleared his throat. "First, regarding the house at 114 Willow Grove, the bank has determined that without Tom's guarantee the current mortgage cannot stand. You've received notice of this?" "We got their stupid letter," Mark snapped. "They said if Dad reinstates his guarantee we're fine, so just tell him to sign the paper and we can all move on." Alan folded his hands. "Tom has made it clear he will not be reinstating that guarantee." Jenna leaned forward. "Why not? He helped us get that house. He can't abandon us now." I helped you because I believed we were on the same side, I said. Then you showed me exactly what side you were on. Oh my God, Jenna exploded. You're really going to throw away your relationship with your son over one bad night? One bad night is a moment, I said. You and Mark have been planning what to do with me and my assets for months. That's a pattern. Maddie flinched. Jenna shot her a look so venomous I felt it from across the table. You had no right to listen, Jenna snarled. You're a child. Who you were comfortable weaponizing to get what you wanted, I said. Thankfully, she chose honesty instead. Alan lifted a hand. Let's stay focused. The bank will proceed with foreclosure if new arrangements aren't made. There will likely be a public sale. Tom is within his rights to bid on that property or not as he sees fit. Mark's head snapped toward me. You're going to buy our house out from under us? I haven't decided, I said. What I do know is that I won't let the two of you occupy a home paid for with the bones of my retirement while you treat me like a burden to be managed and eliminated. You're unbelievable, Mark said, voice shaking. Mom would be disgusted. Maybe she would, I said softly. Or maybe she finally would have seen what I've been trying not to see for years. Alan turned to the second folder. As for Tom's will, previously assets were to be divided equally between Mark and a small scholarship fund in Ellen's name. That has changed. Tom has created a trust for Madison's benefit. Mark, you are no longer a beneficiary. The room went silent. What? Mark whispered. Nothing? Jenna's voice rose into a shrill pitch. You're leaving us nothing? Contest it, Mark said suddenly. We'll contest it. You can't just cut your own son out. That's elder abuse or something. You're welcome to hire your own attorney, Alan said calmly. But there is a no contest clause. If you challenge the will and lose, you forfeit any claim to personal property or sentimental items that Tom might choose to leave outside the trust. But he can't do this, Mark insisted, almost pleading now. He can, Alan said. And he has. Mark slammed his fist on the table. So what? You just skip straight to punishing us? No warning? No chance to fix it? I gave you 43 years of chances, I said quietly. From the first time you rolled your eyes at your mother while she cooked your favorite dinner, to the last time you asked me for money and called it helping the family. You had a chance at Ellen's wake to be a son. You chose to be a manager. This is the result. Jenna's voice dropped to a cold hiss. You're a lonely old man with a half-paid house and a pension. We were your insurance you didn't die alone. Think about that when you're eating canned soup in that ugly kitchen. Jenna, Alan said sharply. Careful. It's all right, I said. She's telling me exactly who she is. That's helpful. I turned to Maddie. You can wait in the hall if you want, sweetheart. No, she whispered, eyes bright but steady. I want to hear. You're poisoning her against us, Mark snapped. You did that yourselves, Maddie burst out suddenly. You talk about Grandpa like he's a problem to solve, like he's some ATM that's running out. You laughed when he left the wake. You said, Good, that will make it easier to tell the lawyer he's losing it. I heard you. Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Mark stared at her like she'd slapped him. You weren't supposed to, Jenna began. Know the truth? Maddie shot back. Yeah, I figured that out. I put a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry you had to hear any of that, I said. But I'm glad you told me. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, trusting people who see me as a burden. Alan closed his folders. I think that's enough for today. Next steps will come in writing from the bank and from our office. You may want to seek independent counsel. Mark rose abruptly. His chair scraped across the floor with a shriek. This isn't over, he said. For your sake, I replied. I hope it is, because every time you push, I'll push back with the only thing you understand. Boundaries. Jenna stood too, shaking. Don't expect Maddie to come over anymore, she said. If you're cutting us off, you're cutting her off too. Maddie inhaled sharply. Mom, no. She's almost 15, I said. In a few years you won't control where she goes. Until then, if she wants to see me, my door is open. If you want to punish her to get at me, that'll be another choice you have to live with. They left in a storm of slammed doors and muttered threats. The room felt strangely peaceful afterward. Maddie leaned into me. Did you mean it? She asked. That your door is always open? I meant every word, I said. This house, what's in it, and what I've set aside, none of it exists to reward bad behavior. It exists because your grandma and I loved our family. That includes you. Whether your parents choose to act like family is up to them. In the months that followed, the consequences rolled in like slow tides. The foreclosure went through. The big brick house at the corner of Willow Grove and Maple got a bright yellow notice on the front door that everybody in the neighborhood noticed. I drove past once and saw Jenna hauling boxes into a smaller rental, rage written in every line of her body. Mark never called again. Maddie came by whenever she could. Sometimes she stayed for dinner, sometimes for a whole weekend when her parents needed space and sent her to Jenna's sisters. We cooked Ellen's recipes, watched black and white movies she'd loved, and sometimes just sat quietly, listening to the old clock in the hallway tick. The trust documents came back finalized, stamped, and solid. My house would go to it if I passed first. If I needed assisted living someday, the trust would pay for it before a single cent went to anyone else. On the 1-year anniversary of Ellen's death, Maddie and I went to the cemetery with flowers. The stone was simple. Her name, her dates, and the words beloved teacher, wife, mother, grandmother. I wish she were here, Maddie said, brushing snow from the letters. I do too, I said. Every day. Do you think she'd be mad at you? She asked quietly. For everything with Dad? I was silent for a long time. I think, I said finally, that your grandma believed in kindness, but she also believed in consequences. She used to tell her students, if you don't study and you fail the test, that's not the test's fault. I looked at the stone, imagining Ellen's wry half-smile. I gave your father every chance to study, I said. He chose not to. This is just the test showing him the results. Maddie nodded slowly. I'm glad you didn't let them put you in a home, she whispered. You're not a burden to me. The wind picked up, carrying the faint ringing of the church bells across the road. That's good enough for me, I said. Now I sit in the house Mark thought he'd inherit, paying my own bills, cooking my own meals, planning for my own future. The money that once bailed out his bad decisions sits quietly growing in accounts with Maddie's name written on them in legal language he can't touch. Sometimes on quiet nights I think about that moment at the wake, the look on Mark's face when he asked me to leave. How sure he was that I'd always be the one to bend. He taught me something that night, that love without respect is not love, it's leverage. I took the leverage back. So here I am, an old man who got kicked out of his wife's wake and responded by reclaiming his life, his money, and his dignity. My son lost a house, access to an inheritance, and, for now at least, his relationship with his own father. My granddaughter kept her voice, her conscience, and a future that doesn't depend on anybody's manipulation. Tell me honestly, did I do the right thing? Or did I go too far in teaching my own son what it means to lose the man he thought he could treat like a burden forever?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.